Judith, and Tony.
Oh.
They said they weren't going to be here.
Okay. Wonder what they're doing.
John, okay. All right. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Charter Commission for the town of Harwich. Their September 11th, 2025 regular meeting. And we have a quorum here. And we also have a guest, Tony Schiavi, who is our interim town administrator, acting town, whatever you are.
Both of those, apparently.
Both of those. And for our minutes taker, John Chory is not here, Judith is not here, Tony is not here. Do you know everyone, Tony?
I do. I've
Okay.
met everybody, sure. Yeah.
Great, all right. So first on the agenda is the regular minutes for August 28th.
Move to accept.
Second?
So Richard, second, Sandy. Any corrections, additions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 6-0, great. Moving along.
Motion to adjourn?
Sit down. Continuing business, I'm still waiting for responses from town agencies. I know that Capital Outlay and Finance Committee will be coming. I don't know who else, but those are two good,
Important.
two important
Energy
committees.
Committee will be coming.
Great, so the Energy Committee will be coming, great.
You
So,
got an inside scoop on that.
Do you?
Valerie. So, once we get them, we'll probably start talking about those probably as we go along. Finance Committee will be in the finance section, Capital Outlay will be in the finance section, because those are kind of tied together, the others as we get them. All right, we are continuing on. I think we have talked enough about the Select Board, Chapter 3, and now we're into Town Administrator, and really the focus of this meeting tonight is really to talk to Tony about what he's seen in other towns that work, because he's been in a couple of other towns, what he sees that has worked, suggestions he might make, considering he's probably, memorized the charter by now.
Parts of it, yes.
So I think that's where we are at this and what we could do and questions that we have.
Madam
Go
Chair,
ahead.
if I could, General Schiavi, if you could, to the people who are watching at home, maybe the first time seeing you, could you let them know where you've been, how long you were?
Oh, sure, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'm from Massachusetts, so I was born and raised in Massachusetts, I went to Cape Cod. But in Metro West, I was born in Framingham, grew up in Holliston, went through parochial school in Framingham, Assumption now University in Worcester, degree in mathematics, ROTC through the Air Force at Holy Cross, went into the Air Force in 1983, was a pilot for most of my career, but I spent 10 years active duty and 20 years here on Cape Cod at Joint Base Cape Cod in the 102nd. Finished my 30 years there. I was also the executive director of Joint Base Cape Cod under Governor Patrick, and retired in 2013 and wanted to continue in public service, so I became the town manager and police commissioner in Ashland, which is right where I grew up and had family
And
there.
police commissioner?
Yes.
Is that self-appointed or?
No, you walk in and they say, here's your badge and here's your cruiser, and but great introduction into town government. Did a lot of really amazing stuff there. Left in 2016 to come back to the Cape. We never moved, so this is our home. My wife's family goes back 100 years, which I know is infancy, and some of the folks in town, some of the names, but we were never leaving. She was still working. Our kids were being raised here in town, and so we had a condo there. I went back and forth. But then in 2016, I left Ashland to come back to what I had hoped to be serving at a higher level of public service, and ran for state senate in 2016 for the Cape and Islands. After the election was over, went into the private sector, really missed town government, and the town of Bourne was looking for a new town administrator. And again, for me, it was a way to get back, because Ashland was hometown turf. Bourne, I spent 20 years of my military career there, and they were extremely good to us during the base closure and realignment in 2005 and supporting the base and helping us to save over 1,500 jobs. I was the commander at the time. And so for me, it was a chance to get back. So I went to Bourne right before COVID. We got through COVID amazingly well and changed outlook on life and decided to retire a bit earlier than maybe what I anticipated. So that was in 2021. So I was retired for about 4 years, happily in East Harwich, until my phone rang, which I don't normally answer all the time. And so here I am, happy to help. It's our hometown, and can add value to the town and the community, through this transition, that's why I'm here, so,
Well, we
I hope I can
we
do that.
appreciate it.
thank you.
And appreciate you making time to come to talk to us tonight.
Sure, you bet.
Although it was would you like to talk, come to our committee? I said, sure, and I said, how about Thursday?
It's got nothing else to do, as long as it's not a Monday, although that might have been good too.
Yeah.
I would have still came.
More fun.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna just let us have a conversation without, I know, I'll start it off with one of the things that we've been talking about is, Sandy termed it to not build walls, but build,
Guardrails.
guardrails between select board and town employees, department heads specifically. And how that should look, when in your opinion, should a select board member specifically, or the select board itself, approach and talk to a department head or a department?
Well, towns approach it differently. I guess I would start off by saying, you have a really important job to do, right? A charter commission has the ability to make, significant organizational and other, changes in our charter, which is our guiding document, right? And so the way I look at it in general is really starting at the top, right? And how we want the governance of the town to be organized, right? And I think, in today's environment, it's about looking at how do you get the organization right? How do you set the right conditions for success? Because municipal government only gets more complicated over time. There's a lot to do. Many people like myself make a profession out of the role that that we serve in as a chief administrative officer or whatever. And so, I think it's making sure in the way the charter is structured and the words that it has in there is that the roles that are played by the various parts of our government, right? So, town meeting is the legislative branch, the select board is the executive branch, and if you know anything about sort of, the business model, right? The board of directors is essentially what the select board is. The shareholders are all of us that go to town meeting and the residents that vote on things. And below that is your town administrator, which is really your CEO, right? And my feeling is that the places that run the best is when the select board has one belly button to push for making sure that the policy they establish in the direction that they set for the community, they have one person to go to make sure all of that is actually happening. Because if you have a disconnect there, you end up creating what I call organizational turbulence, right? Where you have your chief person at the top is directing the departments and working with them on various things. And if you have things coming in from the side, you can often create inefficiencies, maybe sometimes not on purpose, but it can create turbulence in the organization where it disrupts everything that's going on. And what you end up with is an inefficient organization that's less effective. Now, in the two communities that I was in, I served as a strong town manager in Ashland and a very strong town administrator in Bourne. And so as you go through that and talk through it.
What does that mean? We toss that term around, strong this, weak this. What does that mean? Define that.
So and you'll find people in this career field use those terms. And they're strong and weak on both. So I was a strong town manager in Ashland, but my counterpart in Hopkinton, also a town manager, was a weak town manager, as town managers go.
Is that by personality or by?
No, it's by the charter.
Okay.
It's by the charter. So it really comes down to what is your level of authority and span of control to manage and lead the organization, right? So in both of those communities, every single person in town, fire chief, police chief, all the department heads, every single employee, right, reported, they were appointed by me, and the selectmen appointed one person, which was the town manager or the town administrator. And so, negotiate collective bargaining agreements, sign collective bargaining agreements. In one town, I actually signed the contracts and said, oh, by the way, board, I settled the police contract, if you want to see it, right? So, other towns, you negotiate the contract and the board ratifies that, right? So they have some visibility in that, but they're not directly involved in it. They really settle on the policy side. so that they can look at the long-term vision of the community and work on what I call the big rocks, and not get sort of drawn into the day-to-day type of activity, so you're talking about the big issues. Now, in both of those towns, I was able to facilitate strategic plans with the select board, right, so that we could set a vision for the community, we set our mission and our values, so that as we brought big things to the select board, big housing, you know, like when I say big, I don't mean necessarily like 1,000 units, but we brought, you know, major housing projects, economic development opportunities to the board. They have a role to play in that, because part of their big policy had to do with housing and had to do with economic development in the community. And so we were able to make big gains with that, because they had time in their agendas to have those conversations, get public feedback, right? We had a very engaged community like we have here, and it was an opportunity for them to be able to talk to their executive branch about some of these projects and how they felt with it, instead of spending a lot of time on the agenda on some of the smaller, when I say smaller, some of the things that more rightly would belong in the hands of whoever you have appointed to run your organization. So, and if you start to split that up, that's when I think, again, this is in our career field terms, when we say weak versus strong, that some of that day-to-day stuff gets pulled out and ends up usually in the hands of the select board, right? And so they spend time on those type of things. So my whole background is in organizational efficiency and structure, right, and done that in a number of places. And so I think as you all go through that and work through the charter and where you see things, one of the things you want to take a look at is making sure that there aren't ambiguities that make their way into the document, right? So if you look at ours, there's a line in there that said, you know, I think it still says selectmen, but will not normally get involved.
We've already we got that one targeted.
So,
Normally goes.
Yeah, so, but again, those communities, but very effective. It's not like the board is not involved. They're involved in all the major things that are going on that, again, with feedback from the community, as they set their strategic goals and vision out there. Because arguably, if they think about it, those policy level decisions, they're not for us. They're for 1 and 2 generations ahead of us. And so part of that feedback is to understand what the young people, the people that will come in behind us, what's important to them, what do they want to see in their communities. And it's different from when we were, you know, coming up through the system. They want, you know, more economic activity. They want passive and active recreation, because people are more active today. They want safe community, good schools, right? And so you're able to spend time on cultivating the community around some of those areas where that part of our population that's going to come in behind us and be the future leaders of the community, we have an understanding about what it is that they're looking for in their town, and how can we foster that, facilitate that, right? And you know, you get informed by, you know, the local comprehensive plan, the housing production plan, open space. You know, there's a lot of things that filter into that. But to get back to your question, I mean, that's the main difference. It's really about, if you think about this, you know, and the reality is, I mean, you're paying somebody what I would call executive level pay. You need to give them executive level authority, right? And they're held accountable. So that way, if the organization, when you come out of the military, or when you're in the military and you take on command, I mean, part of your oath is that you understand you are 100% accountable for the future successes and potential failures of your organization, right? And so as the board sets policy out for what it, you know, whether it's financial, whether it's, you know, service related or whatever, they have one person to hold accountable to make sure that happens. If you split that up, and we have some of that in ours, it can fracture the organization a little bit. And so part of it is having an understanding of, you know, an $80 million operation we have, which in a couple of years could be a $100 million operation. There's a lot of moving parts, and if you heard me the other night, we're trying to recruit again for a finance director. As somebody that's held senior leadership positions, that's a key part of my leadership team, right? I mean, and I think I said this, if I don't talk to them once a day, I talk to them 2 times a day, and I probably should have said 5 times a day, because all of that is so interconnected. When we're trying to make big decisions and bring that to the board about ideas and stuff, you gotta have people in your inner circle that you work together with to formulate those things. So when you present them to the select board, you should present them to town meeting, everybody's in sync and on the same, on the same page on, how you're gonna pay for it, what's the financial impact of that, which most of that is, so, same thing with HR, right? So much of what we do is around people, that's our human capital. So as a executive level person, when I look at who my inner circle is, those are two key ones right there, just because of how much of our organization runs on people and on finances, right? So as you look at the organization, to me, it's about how do you get the organization right? How do you get it structured in a way in today's environment, 2025 and beyond, what is the best way to get that right? And arguably, sometimes you have to be name and face agnostic, right? In other words, as you think about that, I don't see any faces in these seats. I don't see any names in these seats. I just need to make sure I get the organization right. Then, as a community or as the select board said, okay, now we need to make sure we have the right person in these important seats. Because sometimes what the human nature of it is you resist a potential change because maybe of the person that's in that particular job or that particular role or whatever. And that's where you start down the road of potentially fracturing your organization if you try to make changes to fit personalities or anything else. So I know that's not always an easy thing to do, but it's really important. And in business we do it all the time. In government we also do that. Just again to make sure the organization is set up for success. And so you guys have been involved in our local government for a long time, all of you, right? And so you probably have a good idea where some of those.
This is our test case here.
It is, okay, all right.
Make
well,
me or
that's
break
good.
me.
You always have to have an opposite view, right?
This is the guy who hasn't been steeped in town politics for his whole life. So when the question comes up and we all think we know what we're talking about and Herb doesn't, then the rest of the town isn't going to either.
Right.
So.
And that's what I would also say about the charter, and if you look at it, now obviously chapter 4 deals with the town administrator, but you also need to look at chapter 5, which is the next one, right? I can tell you, I read it and I had to reread it and reread it, I still am not sure I understand what they're saying. Because I don't think the words I don't know if those are words, so when was the first charter done?
Well, we did the first charter in 1987.
Okay.
And then it was redone in 2006. By a different committee altogether.
Okay. All right.
So there were things, of course, in 1987, there were things that were sort of understood. And it was a simpler time, a smaller town. A lot has changed since then. I mean, that's almost 40 years ago.
Yeah. So I think some of the word, talking about divisions and then departments under divisions and, some of the language is probably outdated. And so how do you write what the organization so that people actually can, they can understand it? Now, I read all these things all the time, and if I'm confused, other people could be confused as well. So as you look at other chapters, one of the things you want to make sure there's not something that's set up here in chapter 3 for the select board or chapter 4 for the town administrator, and then you get further down and now there's conflicts. That's a hard job to try to figure out how all those things piece together, but you have to keep going back and forth. And then clear, simple text, right?
Yes, we're into the I think we've had too many instances in Harwich where the attorneys get asked to opine on something, and then this attorney says this, but then they ask the next attorney who comes up with something totally different.
And it could be two attorneys in the same organization.
And
Or
we've
five, like
had.
You would probably agree, a lot of our legislative stuff gets written like that too, right?
So we're definitely, we would like to have I call it the weasel woods, taken out of the charter. That if it's, I think one of my favorite examples is when we got the memo from town council that said Shell was advisory. And
That's a
most
good one, yeah.
of the rest of us looked at it and said, my grammar teacher in 3rd grade, Shell is you gotta.
You got it.
Things like that are exactly why we are here.
Yes.
Because there's been way too much of trying to get the opinion you want based on the ambiguities or sometimes invented ambiguities when things are clear or when things have been done based off the charter for many, many years, and all of a sudden somebody says, well, I don't care how it's been done. We can find a different interpretation of the charter.
Right.
And what we want to do is make sure that there isn't a different interpretation of the charter.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't know on ours, they did have this, and, they had a whole section at the end on charter compliance. They have a charter compliance committee.
Yeah, we're looking
Because
at
at
that.
some point, the charters, I mean, so, and I think I said this to the board when I interviewed them, for the job. So I was gonna take the job, but no, I say that in jest, but, so in the military, when you take on a new role, right, the first thing you do is, what's my authority? Where does it come from? And then you're expected to, apply that as it's written judiciously and appropriately, right? Well, that's our charter, right? I mean, people should view the charter as that, right? It's our governing document that everybody that in this town that votes on it and it gets approved, saying this is how we want our government to run. And I think from an integrity standpoint, and I just look at myself, I look at that and it means something to me, right? So charter compliance can, there's a check and balance you can add to the charter if you think something's going awry with whatever part of the charter that somebody says, well, yeah, that's nice it says there, but I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
You have a charter compliance committee. It doesn't get used often, which is good. Bourne, interestingly, was the last town in the Commonwealth of 351 cities and towns that went away from a full-time select board.
Oh,
Yeah.
And they hung on for a long time, but at the end of the day, I think they realized that as an organization, even with a couple hundred employees, right, that you needed an executive level person by training, experience, education, accomplishments to run and lead that. And they really wanted their board to focus on the strategic policy level things that are facing the town. Because if you think about it in terms of, looking out into the future, we know that there could be cliffs out there could be landmines out there could be opportunities out there even, right? Good opportunities. And so getting the focus there will help the community to either not step on a landmine, maybe diffuse it, not fall off a cliff, right? Because they're focused forward and ahead and not right here in today. Now, that's easy to say, but I think a lot of times what can happen is policy can be kind of like one of these, things up here in the sky, and sometimes people don't really understand where the line is between, policy. What do you mean by that? What am I supposed to be coming up with? It's not like writing a liquor policy or an entertainment. I mean, you have to do those things get done mostly by the staff, and then the board makes changes and votes on it. But I mean big policy about housing, about all kinds of things that we know are important that can affect the fabric of the community if they're not recognized and addressed. So in the Bourne one, I mean, it was pretty specific about making sure that, and there was no wiggle room when you read this thing about the policy part of things and the day-to-day operations part of things. And arguably those that had been there for a while, so both of the select boards that I worked with were amazing. And totally got it. I didn't have to spend any time wondering about, who was doing what and whatever, and we worked together, right? We're part of a team, and I told this board that I look at us as a team. You're my boss, but we're a team. We're gonna bring problems up and solve problems together and make the community better by doing that. So whatever changes get proposed out of this at the end, wherever they may be, there's gonna be some rough spots in transition things, because it's, it could be different than what we do today, or maybe not, it just depends on, as you know, at the end of the day, the town meeting needs to, vote on these things, and I don't know, is there an election too?
No, it's
Yeah.
just an election.
Just an election.
Okay.
Just an election.
So the public outreach and all of that stuff to make sure that people in the community that show up at the election really understand, what's being proposed and how it changes and why it's a good thing. Because I think at the end of the day, we all want the best thing for our town.
we do have on our list some kind of charter compliance. We haven't fleshed that out, but we're pretty clear we need a charter compliance something. We also did spend some time talking about Chapter 5, because that, I've been in, dealing with the town government for a while, as most of us have, and reading through Chapter 5, I don't know what it says either. it's leaves out,
It's clear as mud in some ways.
and it completely leaves out the water and sewer department, which is a huge department. It completely leaves it out. So we've talked some about that, but I think we'll drill down more into that, putting together what should be that structure as to what are the major departments.
Right.
When they did the last major rewrite, they didn't have a sewer department.
Right, that's right.
So
They had water.
that wasn't even really contemplated at
Yeah,
that point. I
right.
mean, yeah, we'd known for 50 years that we needed to do something about sewers. We had a board of selectmen back then that decided that they didn't want the 90% the government was offering to sewer the town, but
Yeah, right.
talk about a missed opportunity. Of course, we'd probably be redoing it by now anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think, as I mentioned about the division, right, so there was just, one, because I go in and I do read this stuff to make sure I, stay in my lane, but, so when you have divisions, right, so they created a finance division and essentially a highway and maintenance division, right, it's kind of outdated terms.
Well, we changed it years ago to DPW,
Yeah.
Department of Public Works.
So should that
But-
not maybe include the water and sewer?
Yeah, well, again, if you stay with the division concept versus, maybe just calling them departments. Because departments can have, they might have done, finance, because finance encompasses assessing, treasury, accounting. So divisions might be appropriate as long as it's clear about, because right now, the select board hires the finance director, so that's up in section 3, right, along with town administrator, town council, whatever. But when you look at section 5, it says responsibilities for the functions administered within the several divisions, which includes finance, shall be vested in the town administrator, right? Unless otherwise provided by general laws, this chapter, or bylaws. Now, I don't believe there's anything out there that says, no, all those people is invested in the town. So now you have a situation where, you have somebody that's appointed by the board, but all the functions underneath them, I appoint all those people, and according to this, what they do is vested in me, right?
Except for the boss of the department.
Except for the boss of the department, right?
Interesting, yeah.
So that's where you have to see, is something up here affecting something down here? Now, I don't know how long the finance director position's been, I heard it could be 20 years, maybe 2005 or something. And so they added that, which is fine, I mean, they voted for it and whatever, but did they go down and change anything else? Because when you read this, it's confusing about, how do you do that? And because those 3 departments are major people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not thinking about finance, or, hey, what are we thinking about this? Where can we find new sources of revenue? Where can we find efficiency in how we're doing things? Just creating the budget alone, you gotta make sure you have people that are on your, that are there supporting that effort, because that's such a big part of, what we do at town meeting. I mean, we're asking the town for a lot of money, and my feeling is that one of my obligations to them is to demonstrate that we're using every tax dollar that we're given, every revenue that comes in to its maximum benefit, right? So we're always looking at efficiencies, we're always challenging how we do business, new ways of doing business, and you're gonna see, likely as we build the 27 budget, that's gonna be a big part of that, because we have some things coming down the line. We're still trying to negotiate 8 collective bargaining agreements all at once. A huge task.
Who thought that was a good idea?
But that's the hand we've been dealt. So if you think about this, for right now, I mean, until those are all done, if we start building a 27 plan, we're building it on a foundation made out of sand. That's not a good place to be. So, but we're working through that. So, I mean, that we'll get, the board's been great, and but it's those kind of things that can kind of sometimes slow down the train and build on you. And before you know it, the snowball is coming down the hill and you can't stop it because it's too big. So I always try to look out in front to try to pick those things up and get ahead of them, so that you don't have that happen. And so you need that forward, and I need the white space on my calendar too, to do the big thinking the board wants to do, right? Because most boards will rely on the town administrator to help them, formulate those things, because you have a different, you're looking through a different lens sometimes on how you might address that, and bringing ideas to them about it. They say, hey, we want to do X, And I take that and say, okay, I understand the intent of what the board's asking for, and then I go back with the staff and everybody else, say, hey, look, this is what we wanna do, let's figure out how we can make this happen, where's the money gonna come from, what can we do to make it, make this a reality? And then bring that back. That's how big ideas get implemented, everybody has sort of a role to play in that. So, but we all need that white space, that's for me, you know, you delegate a lot, cause I need white space on my schedule to think of those big things that we need to be working on, and your finance team and others are a major part of that, to make those things come to fruition. One of the things I think that is, one of the snowballs I think that's built on the town is some of the housing stuff that are being proposed right now, where, you know, I always say, you know, failure to plan means you be planned upon, right? So some of the housing projects, not so much in Bourne, but definitely in Ashland, we made great successes out of those projects because we were out in front with what was going on before that stuff ever made it to the ZBA for comprehensive permits or to the planning board for a site plan approval. And we had the ability to shape, with the select board, had the ability to shape those projects in a way that made sense for the town, and we knew that there would be, you know, acceptance around those plans. And so by getting out in front, you have to ask for stuff, right? So we had one project, a huge apartment development, they wanted 500 units. It's huge, in a very sensitive area, right? Sound familiar? We have those all around, right? And so we went out and got in front of it, got a $6 million grant that we brought to the table, said, we got $6 million right here. You know, you wanna work with us to scope this thing down to a size that, you know, is reasonable? And they're like, $6 million, what are you gonna do? Oh, we're gonna do blah, 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 blah. Said, yeah, we're interested. And then we got another 9 million from them. So we had $15 million. They bought us a new ladder truck. They gave us 2 acres of the property for municipal use, right? You gotta ask for stuff. But what happens is by the time they get to the planning board or ZBA with all their documents and stuff, trying to change those is incredibly difficult.
Too late.
It is incredibly difficult.
Tony, I'm gonna try to.
Yeah, that's okay. I know, I'm talking just.
No, that's
yeah.
great. Let's go back to something. You mentioned that the role of the town administrator, you see it as a chief executive officer.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at what the town administrator does now, and I see it as a chief operating officer.
Mhm.
And that's a major difference. And then I look at the role of the select board, and I say, well, if their title is they're doing executive functions, that's an issue. Even in the title itself, it's an issue. Because when you say policy, that clicks in my mind legislation.
Mhm.
Rules under which the mass will follow. Rules under which everyone will follow. Vision, guidelines, all that. If I look at them as executive, that changes everything. So names become very important in terms of determining what the organization does.
Mhm.
So that's what I understand from what you're saying is chief executive, town administrator, maybe even looking at the select board more as a legislative body rather than policy, because I don't understand the word policy either.
The town meeting is our legislative
I understand,
branch.
I understand what it is. I'm just talking about, there's a puzzle and I'm trying to put the puzzle together. And the first word I had written down before you started was policy. Because I'm not sure, I asked just this week about 15 people, their understanding of policy and what is it? And now I'm confused, but now I don't know. Before I went, I thought I did.
Yeah.
So that very definition is defining everything. And the ambiguity starts right at the top, right with the naming. So I said all that to get to this one point. If I gave you a plain piece of paper and I said to you, there's boxes all the way down, and you're a town administrator and you're looking to go work in a town, what are you looking for? What are the check boxes that you have that say, this is for me, this is for me? And let's leave money aside because that's a non-issue for me. But in terms of everything else, the structure, the government, the people, those types of things that are in your head, that's important, I think, to hear.
Yeah, I think, well, as it relates to legislative, you know, that's, you know, vested in Mass
Yeah.
General law and
Yeah.
all that, right? So when I say CEO, it's more about the work involved, not the title. Because the select board is the chief executive for the town, right? So, I don't wanna confuse anybody with the
Not
title.
confusion.
But that's how I view the job in terms of responsibility. So if it was someone like myself, and I did this in both towns, even though I had a personal connection or desire to go there, for someone like me, and I think most executives would look at it this way, is the first thing they do is they pull up the charter, right? They wanna see how the structure for the position is codified in the charter, right? What's my level of responsibility, my span of control, ability to, be effective in all the words that say, you not only run the town, but you're responsible for the fiscal, reporting, and all the things that we have in ours. And so I look to make sure that the way that it's set up is a way in which I'm gonna be successful, right? Given what the skills I bring to the table, the way I view leadership and all of that, does the charter allow me to function in a way that I'll be able to be successful, knowing how I view executive leadership, right? So, and I think most people that are looking for jobs probably do the same thing. And then aside from that, you're looking at the dynamic in the town, right? Because you work for a 5-member elected board, you're obviously gonna either watch meetings or whatever, and you wanna see how things go to make sure that you feel like you can, fit in with the people you're gonna be working the closest with, right? And so you have to, look at that and evaluate what you see and witness when you watch meetings of a community you may be applying to or interested in applying to make sure that the way that works is something that you can fit in with the way you look at things, your personality, way of doing business. You have to be a good communicator. And so those are a couple of things that I, have used, previously to look to see whether that's a place I wanted to potentially work.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me
Paul.
ask if you feel, in your view of the charter, that that is the case here. Do you sense that there are places in here that could be improved? Do you think that the charter as presented here adequately, appropriately, correctly identified what you were getting into?
Yeah, I look at it differently coming in as an interim, right?
Right.
Especially in my own town, but I think I would say generally that the way, and I think I mentioned this earlier, the way that ours is currently structured, I think the organization's fractured a bit in terms of, you have these splits.
Be specific.
So, but what?
Well, as I mentioned, like in finance, right, it's just as someone, you're responsible for the managing of take the schools out of it, right? So, you're managing a, 40-some odd $1 million operation, 200 people, a diverse set of responsibilities when you look at how far and wide, we always think of, public safety and DPW, right, the big guy, but we have a lot of really important departments, right? And so you have a lot of diverse responsibilities. You wanna make sure that you have built into the charter your ability to lead that organization successfully as the top person. And so there's a couple of areas where it's kind of fractured in, I think, important places that have the potential to create some inefficiencies in what we do and how we do it.
And that would be the finance.
Well, that's one of them. You have
One.
HR, right? So again, that's
HR.
a.
How about the public safety side of things?
Well, again, as a strong, both the police chief and the fire chief, work for the town
You were
administrator.
the fire chief, were you, in Ashland too?
Police commissioner.
No, but I didn't know if you also had the fire department.
Oh, yeah, well, they call me the public works commissioner too, and I work with both strong chiefs and, weak, because they do the same thing, right? You got a strong fire chief, you got weak, right? And so I work with both, and fine, because when you come in, again, if you look at a strong fire chief, if you know what that is, then that chief has responsibility to hire his firefighters, fire his firefighters, manage his department, his equipment, whatever. He has full accountability to that, and you gotta hold him to that, right?
But in our charter here, the fire chief is appointed by the board.
And so is the police chief.
The police
Right.
chief.
And how does that fit into what you see from experience?
Well, it's not related to anything, I'll say, that's gone awry here that I know about, but I would say generally speaking, if you're in the, a town administrative career field, it's an accepted fact that you are gonna work for 5 individuals, right? Unless you have a 3-member board, some of them still have a couple of those. Not always true on the public safety side, and I think what you always have to be mindful of, the town administrator is an apolitical position. You're not political, you shouldn't be swayed by political, influences or whatever. And it keeps integrity in the government, right? So in Bourne's case, it had gotten so politicized with a full-time board of selectmen and things that were going on that the residents finally said, hey, enough of this, and created an extremely strong select board professional administrator form of government to ensure that there was no politicalization of anything getting into the nuts and bolts of how a town runs, whether it's public safety, public works, whatever. And so that could happen in public safety, and I'm not saying it's happening here, but it could. But if you have a town administrator that everybody is responsible to him, it doesn't, if a strong fire chief's totally fine. Now, interestingly, there's not a similar statute on the police side. To me, if you have a strong fire chief, you ought to have a strong police chief. Now, you can do that through the charter. If you basically take the strong fire chief statute and turn it into police language and put it in the charter, and I had one of these, and put it into the charter, you now have a strong police chief.
And what
Those, because I think those two departments, because especially public safety, probably should be in the strong category because of how technical they are, right? You don't want, whether it's a town administrator doing it or whatever, because that can happen too, if as a police commissioner, but when I was a police, but I had a police chief I trusted, that I respected, and let him run his department, right? And I was there more for that, typically a commissioner, you're like the civilian oversight kind of thing. And so, so I think, again, having one belly button to push, it also makes the select board's job easier in my mind. If I was a select board member myself, and I understand the role as it's brought out in a charter, I prefer to say I'm gonna focus on that. And when
There's
you
a
have to
sign up
worry
there.
about hiring a police chief or a fire chief, or if there's some issue that you have to deal with, it takes time away from other things. Like anything else, anything can work if it's done right, right? So it's not to say that our setup related to public safety is not the way to do it, because it can work. It's just trying to figure out what do you think is the best way for us to organize our town.
And we want to try to figure out what is right.
Mhm.
We're trying to figure out what's the best way to go. And you have the experience to sort of guide that route a bit. And so I was kind of looking for a sense of whether what we have here falls short of the mark, and how do we should we as a board sort of favor a strong chief, a weak chief? What works better with the public, with a strong, let's say, strong administrator?
Yeah, I mean,
If you have a strong administrator, would you have by nature a strong chief?
I've had both.
Okay.
Yep, in one town it was a strong fire chief, and another town it was not. So, I appointed the firefighters and whatever, if there were, disciplinary things, I needed to get involved in that. But I think when you have a strong chief, if you look at somebody that's become a police chief or a fire chief has a lot of education, they have a lot of experience. And frankly, it's such a technical area that the average person shouldn't be in charge of that. They should be in charge of that. But you can have a strong town administrator and a strong police chief and a strong fire chief, and it would work. It could work just fine.
And how would you class the chief and fire chief and police chief here?
Well, our fire chief is under the strong chief statute, so that's a statute that town meeting accepted at some point in the
Yes, we did.
past.
Years
So
ago.
that's how you establish that. There's not a similar statute for strong police chiefs, but through the charter, you can write, it's not a big thing just to identify how you identify a strong chief. And so that language can be put into the charter under the police department that creates, in other words, he is the appointing authority for all police officers. He's responsible for all the operations and equipment and all the things that go on in a police, just like the fire chief. So you can almost take that, you know, the statute and put it in for the police chief.
So like the fire department or the fire chief has a statutory, established, let's say, role, and that's been plugged in, that's been accepted. Is there a similar set of comparable?
No, we
In the
make one.
statute?
No,
We
we
make
already
one.
said
I
that.
know
No, there
we don't
isn't.
have one, but is,
No, the law
there
doesn't
isn't
have
one.
There
one.
isn't
there is
one.
one,
There
okay,
isn't
that's
one.
my, okay, there is one, so we could.
There
we could
isn't
bring
one.
that in.
There is not one.
There is
There
not
is
one.
Not one,
Not one.
okay.
But we can make up our own.
But we could mimic
Right,
what the strong fire
right,
chief
right.
within the charter.
Okay, well, I was just trying to figure out whether there was one
No,
on both sides or only on one side.
No.
And if I may, Madam Chair.
Go ahead. Will you cut the Madam Chair bit, all
You
of
are
you?
the chair and you're a man.
Just say Linda.
And I like your point, Paul, of getting to where do you find the deficiencies in this charter?
Yeah.
And listening to our interim town administrator, he sees it. Obviously, in my read of what he's telling us tonight, he is a believer of a strong town administrator. And one of the things I've been, General Gavi, is that from the beginning, I hear words like administer. You mentioned that tonight. What does administer mean? I like hire, report to, and evaluate. Very strict words of exactly what's being done. There are a lot of words that are very ambiguous, and we're going to need a very, very strong glossary in this charter. But I agree that, and Paul, you made this point a couple times, select board members are elected by the general populace, which is great. Anyone could get their signatures and run. But there are some times that people have absolutely no experience, and you use the phrase, stay in your lane. I'm trying to stay in my lane. And that when we hire someone, and if people did not see the select board meeting the other night, they've established a new rate structure, pay structure for the new town administrator coming in, substantially increasing what it was from 210 to 240, or was it 50 at the end of it?
40.
40. It's a major change from what we've had. And at that level, that person better have the credentials and the education and the experience to be a CEO in this community, whereas you could have someone who's elected as a member of the board with no experience whatsoever. I would like someone who's got the knowledge, the experience, and the credentials to be running this town. And policy, again, looking at a number of definitions of what it is, it's a plan of action, is what it does. And having them do that, we're going to look at a charter that the town will vote on. And now is the opportunity to make those changes. And this town has been fractured, not just this charter. This town has been fractured because we've put personalities and looked at personalities rather than the positions. And I love that phrase. It's an agnostic. It's just really, it's we're looking at a position and not the person who's sitting there. Because those personalities have got us to where we are today. And I believe your first meeting with the staff, you talked to them about building bridges to the community. And you mentioned that tonight, here again. And the divisions that are in our charter, it not only confuses people, it confuses employees. And when you have an employee saying, well, who do I report to? I love back that phrase, who do I report to? Do I, as a department head, go to the division as an assessing director? Do I go to the finance director? Or do I go to the ATA? Do I go to the town administrator? No, there's a hierarchy. And Lou brought in the organizational chart that we have right now. It's abysmal.
Yes.
There is no recognizable chart that's there. And I, for one, am a strong believer in a strong TA and relegating that board back to doing what it should be doing, staying in their lane as policy. And I want to do what we can. And thank you. Your comments tonight are refreshing because I think we have some issues with this. And if it were a perfect world, we had a police chief and a fire chief who don't mind being appointed by the select board. I would like to still see them appointed by the town administrator and have them report to the town administrator. And if the select board have a problem with the town administrator not doing what they expect, then deal with the town administrator. That hasn't been done. And holding people accountable, coming from a military background, I'm sure you're very familiar with holding people accountable for what they're supposed to do. And I want to get away from the personalities. Well, this guy and that guy and this person and that person, I don't care. We have an opportunity to move forward and to help shape this community. And I think the strong TA
Oh, sure.
is a way to start doing that.
I think part of it too is, while we can say that we want to pull the personalities out, we are not dealing with boxes of cereal. You know, we are electing
Well, in some
people.
cases we are.
I won't say.
Cracker Jacks.
Cracker Jacks. But no matter what we put, we will all into policy and charter and how it's worded. The compliance issue is going to be, it remains an issue, because if you've got someone who isn't going to follow the charter and is going to get involved in the minutia of a department, you know, what color the forms are, then that's not going to work. But it also, there is that personal level that says you need to push back. And while we have had stuff move this way, the community as a whole has not pushed back. You know, you hear it, you're in Dunkin' Donuts, you know, a couple of people talking, but nobody goes to that, writes a letter to the select board and say, you gotta cut this out. There's gotta be the pushback both ways. The community has to be responsible too for insisting that if we wanted you to do it this way, that's our expectation, you're gonna do it this way. So there's both pieces to it.
Oh, and that's what's missing, that whole idea. I mean, and Sandy has talked about the guardrails, and that's the compliance piece that has to be done.
And we've gotta do that.
And that's gonna be coming,
Let's ask Tony.
Well, if you're going to expect the community to rise up and push back, it doesn't happen unless somebody's building a big building in their backyard. I mean, let's face it. People can barely raise their heads up enough from their day-to-day lives to go and vote. And that's a whole different discussion for another day. My question, a couple of questions that I would have for you, on the compliance. I read your Bourne compliance, but it was a couple of months ago, because I was looking for that, because I tried in 16 to create, well, we called it enforcement, and I think that scared the hell out of people. It was a tactical error. But it had some teeth in it. And I would say, you said it wasn't used very often. And I believe the Bourne one had some teeth in it, or?
It did, oh yeah, and I think the Charter Compliance Committee was appointed by the moderator,
Yeah,
if I
'cause
remember right.
Well, there were two towns. One I think was
Sandwich has one.
Sandwich, and there were two towns that had one, and they were quite different. One was just sort of a kind of a throwaway, honestly. It didn't have much of anything to
I think that's
fight
that's
into.
the one that was appointed by the town administrator. If there was an issue, they went to the town administrator.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I think the Bourne one is more
Well,
independent.
Personally, I would like to see it elected.
well, it is,
honestly.
the Bourne is, membership is 7 members appointed by the town moderator for 3-year overlapping terms.
Well,
Rand-
first of all, that can be complicated, but maybe there are, Eastham, I notice, has a lot of committees that are sort of split in how they appoint them. Moderator gets a couple, FinCom gets a couple, that would be okay. But it's gotta be very independent. It can't be a creature of the Board of Selectmen, because sometimes it's the very Board of Selectmen that's the problem.
And here's the thing.
And I think that's why they picked the moderator,
Yeah.
because, you know, obviously that's an elected position, and you hope that they're just, you know, picking independent people versus
But
if you do it, if, you know, FinCom gets a couple, whatever, well, those might be the people that end up, could, you know, potentially have a charter complaint against them. So
Sandy,
they're-
in this one here, it's 2, like the finance committee that are appointed by the moderator here, may not be a member of any other existing board or committee governed by the charter. So they are totally independent.
Yeah, they're supposed to be the independent voice at the town meeting, right, on all matters
Yep.
financial, right, which is why they vote on every article. And, you know, so they should carry a lot of weight at town meeting for the residents going, okay, that's our independent, voice about, articles that have financial impact.
And hopefully some of that'll change in terms of the past few years. The Finance Committee has gotten very little by way of budget information and financial information. Past few years,
They're kind of the last to know,
they're the, if they know it all.
if they know it all.
And
So
the,
that's where, again, you look at the charters, I mean, I know in the board charter, there was very specific timelines in there.
Oh, yeah,
about-
I'm-
Oh, we
I'm
have,
we had
emailing it.
timelines.
we have
Oh, you do,
timelines, but
nobody
we had,
Nobody followed them.
well, you can't say nobody followed them.
Okay.
You can say that they were not given the information they needed from administration. Lay it right where it belongs.
Right.
Well, yeah,
You
that
know,
became,
Finance Committee used to get a book like this. The last 5 years, it's gotten,
well, we used to get
Tiny.
when I was on the Finance Committee, we had a book like this of
Yeah.
the budget, all the detail and the memos. Past
Well, that's
few
what we-
years,
I
it's
mean,
been,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the one and more, I mean, I went to every finance committee meeting, right? And, you know, frankly, for myself, as we're proposing, you know, major spending and everything else that the board, you know, I present to the board, you know, finalizes it, passes it to the finance committee. I wanna be in there for every second of that, and they,
oh, I am so sorry.
Tell my wife I'm busy.
It's actually my
Tell her
mother.
what she's doing.
I meant to
let me
turn
just finish
this.
one point, Lou. So, you know, I wanted to be there every minute of
She
that,
knows
right?
better than to call me
answer
on a
questions,
Thursday.
provide information so that I would get a positive vote about whatever it was that we were trying, not just the operating budget, obviously that was a big piece of it, but we had all kinds of initiatives that had financial impact, so the more information the finance committee had, I wanted them to have everything. Because at the end of the day, I wanted them to say, you know, finance committee votes 7-0 to support this article. So.
that kind of,
again,
that's
were-
good stuff to hear, because that's some of the stuff we've been talking about for the past couple, 3 months. And that kind of stuff is the, you know, we like to toss around in this community transparency. The such and such department is being transparent. This position is being transparent. The board is, of whatever board it is being transparent. And yet, I think if you took a poll in town, they're anything but.
What you have to do, I mean, we'll get back to
No problem.
your question, but, it's a lot of buzzwords out there.
Yes,
right?
there
So
are.
Transparency is transparency, they say policy, right, so there's a lot of buzz, you say the right buzzword, but the question is, how are you backing that up in reality? And so, I can tell you for me, you know, part of, you know, my role, particularly in Ashland, you know, I would give what I call the, it sounds big, but, you know, the state of the town address ahead of town meeting, right? The chair of the select board spoke, the chair of the finance committee spoke, the school superintendent spoke, chair of the school committee spoke, I spoke and gave a detailed sort of synopsis.
So basically
the-
taking up the whole first night.
No, it's not town meeting, this was a good month or so before town meeting. And it was
We
a
used to
way
have that.
It was a way to, start to get the community aware, because we're asking the folks that show up at town meeting, to make some big decisions. If they show up and they pick up the warrant and go, this is the first time I'm reading this thing, and you know, so we spent a lot of time, you know, and so we had the state of the, and I said, this was a precursor to town meeting, these are some of the things you're gonna see, and then as we got a little bit closer, I would actually have a town meeting forum, right, the town managers forum, where we would sit on TV, and we would literally, and I'd have everybody there, if you had an article in that warrant, you were at that table to talk about your article, the backup for your article, why it was important, where the money was coming from, and, you know, if residents showed up, they could obviously ask questions, and we went through every article in the warrant well before town meeting. And, because my commitment to the community was, I don't want anybody to show up and not know what's going on. Unless they chose not to show up and know, or they chose to show up and not know what's going on, right? But you gave them every opportunity to, gain an understanding, because again, when I went to town meeting, every article that I wanted them to pass, right? And so how do you do that? You have an informed citizenry that knows
Was there a
what's going on.
structure in the charter of that town that addressed that or
No,
created it?
these are initiatives that we came up with as a team, going, how do we have better, because they had a history of important things not passing town meeting, because there were so many unanswered questions, right? So, as a pilot, right, when you prepare for a mission, you spend, okay, here's what we're gonna go out and do. And we spend more time on what's gonna go wrong and how are we gonna handle it. And we spent more time talking about this. And so when we were preparing for town meeting, and I use flying terms all the time, but we would chair fly town meeting. We would know who all the people that like to ask questions, what are they gonna ask? Where they have the answer, right? So we ask and answer every possible question we think somebody's gonna ask.
So you mean you use the P word, planning?
Yeah, right, yeah, and you prepared, right? And you prepared for contingency. What are we gonna do if this question gets asked? What are we gonna do if this question gets asked? Sometimes they got asked, sometimes they didn't, but and I would get everybody, all the department heads, right, an hour or two before town meeting, we were in a room going, are you ready? Are you ready? What are you gonna say? You ready to talk? Because we would bring them up to the microphone to answer detailed technical questions. I said, this is our Super Bowl. And this is how we're gonna approach it. We had pizza and whatever, and it helped build the team. Everybody was there to support each other, right? All the department heads sat together and, but that was.
So you would see that more as a role of unspoken.
Well, that's about
as far as
leadership.
the charter is concerned.
Yeah, that's more
but-
about, how
That's
do you
leadership.
find someone, because when arguably, when you go through a search process, right, so I went through, there were, I think, 70 people that applied for the job in Ashland initially, right? And it was like going through an assessment center, like police chief and fire chiefs go through. I mean, it was, there were written exercises, phone interviews, writing assignments, right? We had the 9-person screening committee, and then we had a professional panel where you were grilled by current former town administrators, right? But at the end of the day, you hope the people that get before the selectmen and the select board as finalists, you would hope that they're all technically competent to do the job, right? So that's the technical side. But where have towns struggled in terms of culture and morale and team and all that stuff, right? That's the leadership piece. And so how do you ensure that the person you're bringing in to run the organization that we're talking about potentially setting up, if they don't have that skill set, it's gonna be a struggle, right? Because we're a big organization, we have a lot of people, there's a lot to do, and the leadership piece is something that you have to figure out, how do you draw that out from your candidate pool to know who are those people that take care of that? Because many town administrators that don't have jobs anymore, a lot of times, it's not that they didn't know how to do finance, or they didn't know how to put a budget together, or whatever, but how did, they lost control of the team, or the culture in the organization, and ultimately, when you have one belly button to push, if something's going wrong, and the culture's bad, the buck stops in the corner office.
Do you think there's an ability to structure that level of qualification statement? We have a qualification statement in here for the town administrator.
You
So
can
we
put that
have,
in, Paul. You can, but here's the thing, and you'll find it in the recruitments when they go out. They want, somebody with the standard stuff, financial acumen, but then they'll say somebody's a good communicator, collaborates, leadership skills.
Soft skills.
Right? That's all written in there. And I know we're getting off topic here about, a search
I don't
process,
think,
but the question will come down is, how do you draw that out during the search process to make sure the person, if you're a select board member, that the person that you wanna choose has those qualities and those skills. It's not on a resume, I can tell you that. I mean,
do you think it's appropriate to have that level of detail in the charter?
No, I don't think so necessarily. Not in that level of detail. I'd have to go back and look and see what the qualification, I mean,
Well,
a
there's
lot
no
of it's around
qualification.
education,
Yeah,
right,
that's-
and experience, saying, hey, we want somebody that, has a, bachelor's in this, or a master's degree in public
Right.
administration or business, right? And,
The only
5 to
visible-
8 years of experience, but at the end of the day, so if you think about my situation, right, so I'm a 30-year military guy, and I'm applying for a town manager job, right, in a town, and, managed to make it through the process, right? Well, yeah, I had the education and all that stuff, but I didn't necessarily have, 5 to 8 years of municipal government experience, and so sometimes, and they always called me the non-traditional candidate, right, which was probably true. And the search consultant said, well, your resume got you in the door, because it was very unique, and the way you structure it and all that. But all those pieces I just mentioned, the writing assignments, the phone interviews, all the stuff we had to go through, that process, the way that they did that was designed to pull that stuff that I'm talking about out. Because you can't fake your way through that, trust me. So I think the challenge for us in Harwich and moving forward is, hopefully in the search process, and some of those elements I mentioned are in the process of the consultant that the board chose, which I thought was great when I read through that, because not all the consultants do that. It's more of reviewing resumes and figuring out, okay, we'll let the search committee look at these people. So I'm encouraged by that. It's just, I think for our future, we need somebody that has the leadership piece, I think, is a big piece. And you probably been around more.
What we need to do is, for the select board, we're gonna get them all the book from Simon Sinek that says, leaders eat last, generals eat last. It's all about team building. I gotta get a copy to each of them, so.
So
All right, wait, back to your question.
compliance. I understand compliance in the private sector. I have an employment contract as a CEO. I have a board of directors that if I don't follow that what's in the employment agreement, I'm terminated. Very simple.
Right.
Follows down to employees. The public sector is different. But what compliance can be built in systematically? Is there anything out there where there's a system for monitoring and executing to make sure if someone is going around the rules, if someone is bypassing the charter, that there's maybe at first, and then there's towards the end. Is there anything that's written down as a rule set?
Well, the charter compliance part is mostly, related to the appointed and elected, officials. The town administrators held accountable through their employment evaluation and their contract and what they're hired to do. I'm not sure, the compliance side of that, I think sometimes, the evaluation process struggles a little bit in terms of how you structure it. So you need to structure and evaluate, and I've been evaluated my entire life, right? Every year, both in the military and out of the military. But on the municipal government side, a lot of times boards sometimes struggle with the evaluation process because it's not necessarily well defined, right? What are the key things that we want to evaluate? Now, I don't know about how Harwich is set up, so I can't speak to that, but I helped the board in both Bourne and Ashland help write the town, the things about leadership and communication, financial result, things like that, and wrote a pretty extensive evaluation template for them to use, which I think is very helpful because it's structured in a way that it's easy for them to follow. I think sometimes if you drive it too much for internally, they'll say, well, I don't have enough visibility about how he's managing, right? Because they're supposed to stay out of that, right? So, it's like, well, I'm not sure how I can evaluate how he's, managing, this department because they don't necessarily have visibility in that. So it can be challenging.
Let me get down a little deeper. So from the board side, we have the electorate, and I'm talking theory, not specific.
Right.
From the board side, we have the people in the town who have a decision to make every 3 years on each individual. Other than that, it's kind of hard because the recall process is difficult. It can be changed, but it's difficult. On the TA side, there's always theoretically a fear of taking action on the part of any board or anyone to get rid of someone because of the ramifications it may have. Oh my God, who's gonna fill in? How are they gonna do the job? He's better than somebody, and not taking action. So is there a way to at least assist some of that to not make the actions automatic, but put steps in that force an action?
Well, some of those steps, though, can be, the select board is supposed to be doing an annual evaluation on the town administrator, regardless of contract then. And we could put in the charter that there has to be an evaluation done and completed and put in the public domain by end of April. I'm just picking a date, which is before town meeting and before elections. So we can do stuff like that. I know that the town of Harwich has not had very good personnel evaluation forms. And I said as a library trustee,
Mhm.
and we got frustrated with the direct that we were asked to use. I mean, evaluating the library director with the same form as you would evaluate the part-time circulation desk person was ridiculous. We created our own our own evaluation process. And for the director, it focuses on communication, it focuses on planning, it focuses on strategy, training your staff, keeping the organization running, as opposed to giving the person 2 extra points because they didn't take any sick days, which is a former evaluation form we had. You got points if you didn't take all your sick days.
So one of
Which
the
is
things,
silly.
and I haven't looked at this in the chart, I'm sure you guys have, but, as it relates to, I think what Lou's maybe getting to in terms of with the TA, and so I remember somebody telling me this a long time ago when I took my first job about, what's important, and they were, said, well, it's this, and this, and, oh, how can they fire you, basically? And I'm not sure about ours, but sometimes it's a majority to hire, a super majority to fire, and again, to make sure that,
That's what it is there.
it's just like recall. Recall is made to be difficult for a reason. It should be, something very, major, to be successful, just like, some of the things we wanna put on town meeting, right? So citizen petitions take, 10 registered voters, but other stuff, you have to get, 10% of the voting. Well, you guys know that, 'cause
Geez,
that's what you have to do, right?
It was 15%, 1,819
Yeah.
signatures,
Right, because charter commissions.
all but one of which he collected.
Yeah, because charter commissions are a major, major deal, right? I mean, you guys around the table, right, have an important job to do and elected to do that. They make it like that on purpose, because you don't want to have one every year, right? But there are times when it's appropriate, when more significant changes need to happen, because you can change form of government, you can change somebody that's elected to appointed. You can change an appointed, say like the town clerk's elected. I've done both. I've been elected town clerk and I appointed town clerks. So, but charter commissions can change stuff, right? That's why it's such a powerful and important committee that you all signed up to do. And we thank you for that, because a lot of smart people around the table looking at how our town can run differently or whatever if it's necessary.
It's about 7:45, so I wanted to get any last minute questions in.
Just to tie in very quickly, my understanding, and I asked the previous select board members, when the town administrator has been reviewed, is my understanding that each year the select board comes up with the review procedure that's being used. So that there's not a consistent,
That's right.
how did they evaluate the town administrator 5 years ago? Well, it's very different than the evaluation that was done 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And I like the idea of getting something that is a consistent evaluation. We now have an HR person. To have that person put something together, and again, these folks, the 5 members, have a lot on their plate. They're averaging, reading 200 to 300 pages per meeting to be prepared, if they are, and to have them come up with their own evaluation process.
That's why they struggle.
They did.
That's why boards struggle, because, again, if I hand you and say, okay, so in Ashland and Bourne, it was a policy, right? Here's the evaluation policy, it was all done.
Yeah.
So if one board came in and said, okay, it's the new year, here's the evaluation forms, everybody fill them out, send them to the chair, they collate, whatever. But if each board has to figure out how they wanna rate the administrator, that's where you struggle, because now you have 5 individuals, some may have experience in it, some may not, and so how do you reach consensus about, okay, these are the areas that we're gonna, now they may set goals, right, at the beginning, once their evaluation's done, so okay, for the next year, here's the goals for the town administrator. Now, I tend to use, what they call, SMART criteria, right? So they're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and there's a time limit. A lot of stuff that we work on, you don't get done in a year, right? They're multi-year things saying, hey, I want you to do A, B, C. Well, that could take you 3 years to do, right? So you gotta make sure that, like I say, it's within your ability to get it done. Sometimes they put goals on there, well, I'm not even responsible for that, or the people I would need to bring in to do that don't work, so you can get kinda convoluted that way if you don't understand how you develop develop, goals for your administrator, or if you have too many, then you go, if I have too many, then nothing. I always used to say, if you have too many priorities, then nothing's a priority.
And that's where that leadership comes into that discussion, of having something, well, we don't like what's happening, so we're gonna add this into the review process this year. No.
Yeah. And a lot of times town administrators, I know Sandy's got a question, but town administrators, they spend a lot of time wondering how they're gonna be evaluated, right? I'll give you an example of what happened to me. So I'm brand new in town government, so I'm in this room, the select board's over there, we're negotiating my contract, I got my attorney on the phone, we're going back and forth, and I'm looking at the contract, I said, hey, John, I'm reading this thing, cause you said, how did they fire, whatever, and it says, basically you can move for, what did it say? Malfeasance, nonfeasance, and misfeasance. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? He goes, well, these they can pretty much fire you for anything, right? And I'm going, but he used to be a town administrator, and he was unbelievable. But he said, oh, they can fire for anything. I said, should I be worried about that? He goes, are you gonna give him a reason? I go, of course not. I've never, then don't worry about it. He goes, the next contract, we'll go for just cause or whatever, which is the high standard, right? So yeah, you have some of that. So people get, wrapped around, they ask about how they're gonna be evaluated and whatever, but Sarah, I know you wanted to.
Well, you're talking about evaluations and goal setting.
Mhm.
And it seems to me that, I'm picturing a situation where the town administrator and the select board sit down together to set the goals upon which next year's evaluation will be based. And, you want to come up with the realistic set of goals. I mean, that to me would be the most productive way to go about it. So from right out of the gate, when the fiscal year begins, the town administrator knows what the Board of Selectmen wants to do, and I would suggest after town meeting and elections, although you change the Board of Selectmen, so that's maybe in
Right.
between. Maybe you aim for in
Yeah.
between. But that shouldn't be difficult.
No, and like I say, in both towns, and I have it on my list for here, right? If you look at my list, it's 3 pages, 2 columns, whatever, but some of the major things on there were, seeing if there's interest from the board to have a board retreat, because that's where you need to do it, right? Could be a Saturday or whatever, and, you have breakfast, but you go through, in those cases, we went through a strategic planning process, set our vision and our mission. And Bourne today, if you pull up one, they still read the vision and mission statement every meeting to make sure that they stay focused on the fact of what their vision is, because that's where you're going. No organization gets anywhere if they don't know where they're trying to get to.
That's the ISO
So-
method.
Yeah, so,
Because my brother had ISO in his business,
right.
and it's on the wall, on all the wall,
Yeah,
and
they
all the
post on the
offices
walls.
was the mission statement.
Exactly.
And it was, keep that in mind, just this is what we're supposed to be accomplishing every day.
But and if you do that, that vision statement is out there, right? And so when you look at a community, that vision statement is, what do we want people to think about the town of Harwich or Bourne or whatever when they hear that name, right? And so that vision is where we're trying to go to. The mission statement is the nuts and bolts of how we're actually gonna, do the work to get there. And then we set our community values, and the reason we did that, I explained to them, was that community value surrounds that whole piece about vision, mission, your objectives, right, your goals. Because anytime anybody brought something forward, the first thing we did is we looked at the values, because that was the filter we put everything through. We're never gonna do anything that goes against our values, and we had environmental stewardship and integrity, and we had, some important words there. And every time we brought something forward, we said, how does that fit in? Does it fit with our value? Yep. Okay. Does it fit with the vision statement? Yep. All right, now where does it fit in terms of the goals we set? Because what happens, you set goals, and then you have the stuff coming in from the side going, wait a minute, no, unless it's something that, is a major thing, you try to focus on those goals and where you're trying to get to. And we all work on them. So you can probably find the board strategic plan on their website, but I helped the board and facilitated writing that. And I've seen that they've, updated, as you go along, because it's not just a 1-year plan, because a lot of the stuff we do could take 5 years, 10 years. When you're thinking about like sewer and things like that, Sandy mentioned 50 years ago, right, there was talk about the fact that we're gonna have to sewer, right? That should have been in somebody's strategic plan. So as we went along in time, we're thinking far enough in front of, okay, when is that gonna start? is there opportunities for funding that could help, pay for a big chunk of this versus the tax? So that strategic planning stuff is really important. It's not just, a paper tiger where you write and go, ooh, look at that, it looks good, right? And it sits on a shelf and nobody ever opens it up. You track the goals, you report on your progress, right? You do all that stuff. So when I went to Ashland, coming out of the military, this is something we do all the time. And so I showed up, they didn't have anything. And I don't know if you heard me when I talked to the board, when I don't know if it was Dawn asked about, what are the first, 3 things you're gonna do, right, when you come in, and I said, well, I'm gonna take my cues from you, what do you think needs to go on? But then right after I said, in absence of that, I'm gonna do A, B, C, and D. Right, and spell out a bunch of stuff. So when I got there, they didn't have anything. It's like, well, how are we gonna drive towards? So I wrote up town manager strategic objectives 2013 to 2016. And so when the staff asked about, hey, can I get money for this and I get money for that, they put their budget together and there was a new initiative, they had to fill out a thing and said, tell me how, what you're asking for, how does that fit into one or more of those strategic priorities that we set? And that was their gatekeeper, right? Don't come in with, if it doesn't fit in here, we're not doing it, right? And they were broad enough that you could fit a lot of stuff in there, but it made them think about when they're asking, how's this gonna fit into the larger picture of what we're trying to do? And so we were facing some budget, I don't wanna go too long, because I know you guys, but, we were facing some big budget things. When I got there, we were using $800 to $1 million in free cash, every year to balance the budget. It became this systemic thing that's not, one of my goals was, we're gonna get a AAA bond rating. And they're like, well, okay, well, how are you gonna do that? Well, I'm gonna show you how we're gonna do that. My first budget, we got rid of the $800,000. We actually enhanced services. We didn't cut any positions. We actually enhanced what we were doing. Brought in some new sources of revenue. And we had 2 bond ratings increases in 1 year, which somebody said, that's impossible. That almost never happened, but we did. And literally, as I was walking out the door in January of 2016, I get a text about 2 weeks later saying, we just got our AAA rating, right? But we set the conditions, and that was something that the select board was on, the finance committee, the school committee, we all signed joint financial policies together, because we were all in it together. So they can be very powerful tool. It's not something you just see in business, it works in our line of business too, if it's done correctly and whatever, and that's how you tackle those big rock issues like environmental things, housing, economic development, right, all of that. We have all the pieces here, trust me, we do, with all the arts and culture stuff we're doing, right? I wrote the economic development plan with my team, and that was a huge piece of it, is how does art and culture fit in with economic development and driving economic activity? It's huge, but a lot of people don't understand it, but when we did that, with farmers markets, we did the Dragonfly Festival, all the stuff, we have all those parts already here. How do you bring it all together into, one sort of consolidated view about how the community, benefits from all of that, right? Your public library is another, that was a huge part of that too, right? The public libraries drive economic activity with programs and all.
Well, ours sure does.
Yeah, what's that?
I said ours sure
Yeah,
does.
it does. Yeah, but you have to talk about it, right? And going, how do we support that more? So we were losing a piece of library state aid because we weren't open enough hours.
Ah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm like, well, that's not good. So we didn't have the meals tax at the time, and I'm not a raised taxes guy, but I'm like, everybody around us have a meals tax? Yep, everybody around us has a meals tax. Anybody drive to another town because they don't wanna pay the meals tax? No, that never happens. They'll drive to another town to save 10 cents on gas, but if their favorite
And spend
restaurant-
20 cents to get
Right.
there.
So we said, well, what's that gonna generate? So the finance team, I said, tell me how much that's gonna generate, $200,000, right? But we told them how we planned to spend it. It wasn't gonna go into the black hole, the general fund. I said, every time we come to you with new revenue, we're gonna tell you what we're gonna do with it, right? And so in that particular case, we estimated $200,000 a year. We were gonna have 80% going to promote our economic development policies. Part of it was going to the library to be open full hours. The rest of it was going to the Council on Aging for some of the
Ooh,
stuff
I
we
like
needed
that.
to do there. And so we ended up coming off of waivers. We were able to open the library back up a full amount of hours, and so it was a double benefit. But those type of ideas came because we had white space to sit around and brainstorm about where can we do things differently and take advantage of that. I mean, you're not gonna put, that doesn't go in a charter, but that's the kind of thinker, you want a thinker in this job too, that's, not gonna, just, turn the grind the crank. And bring those to the board, it gets them engaged in those bigger, type issues and get their support for that. Is, I think, just a real game changer sometimes.
So how do you have a selectmen's retreat under the open meeting law?
That was gonna be my
What you do
question,
is you post the
Sandy.
meeting and you sort of say, we hope nobody comes. That's how we did it.
You can restrict public comment, though.
No, but it wasn't
But
even that.
attendance.
Yeah, attendance.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what, and both the times we did, nobody showed up. I think what we said it in a way that this was an opportunity for we had to take general minutes or whatever, because you had to do that. We posted it, we did the Bourne one at the Mass Maritime Academy, we did the Bourne one at the Northeast Conference Center. Which we're both in town. I guess you could say we're going to Boston, you could have a meeting off-site, but you gotta post it. But no, nobody can, and because we socialize it in a way that this was an opportunity for us to do some big thing, throwing stuff up against the wall, whatever. And I think people respected that, and we didn't have any of the public show up at either, and we had more than one. During the time I was there, and it was always, but they saw the results because we came back and said, okay, here's what we talked about, here's what we came up with. They saw the vision, the goals that the board, had decided they wanted to, put on the strategic plan. And so we didn't cut them out of the loop, like we're gonna sit here in secret, nobody's gonna know what we talk about. And everybody was, we had an agenda, this is what we're gonna talk about, I facilitated it for them. And we stayed on point, they understood. So that is not an issue, but that is something you do have to think about.
Well, it's also why it would be very difficult to go back to a full-time select board without a town administrator or a lead selectman even.
Yeah, right.
It would make it really, open meeting laws is very, makes it
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, and they put a lot of controls, as you know, when I ran into this in Bourne, I had to tell the selectmen, you guys are like, you need to fix this, because we had an IMA with Wareham like we have with Chatham on sewer. And they had a subcommittee of 2 select board members and 2 Wareham select board members, and they would get together, right? Well, they weren't. And I'm like, it says right here, a subcommittee is not a way around the open meeting law, right? So, that's why the select boards that are most successful use their town administrator, because they can say, go to that, go to this, go to that, where it makes it difficult for them to be able to engage. Their intent, they know what you want to do, to do there. And so you can use your town administrator in ways to make sure the information's coming back to the select board on important topics, because if they show up and there's more than 2 there, you have a problem too, right? So.
I was gonna ask, see if Herb, you sat there very quiet listening. Comments? Or any questions? Anything noodling?
No.
Okay,
I
one last question here.
The first thing I wrote, and I circled, was higher level discussion. I think you brought that to the table tonight. And having that white space, I think that is the benefit of a strong TA in a community. To give the select board that higher level discussion, not getting involved in the minutia that they do all of the time. And some of the suggestions tonight, I've written down many of them, and I'm sure we'll be discussing and kicking them around again. But I think it's a great oration for a strong TA community.
Yeah, and I think, in terms of the white space thing, right, you need time for the select board to absorb each meeting before they get ready for the next one. Because that is also a part of it, right? We're in it every day. We come to work Monday through Friday. We're embedded in it all the time. And so sometimes when you're bringing these bigger ideas to the board, they need to have the ability to have some of that white space is just in the calendar before they have their next meeting to digest it, to review it, maybe ask questions or whatever, before they're going, oh, I gotta get ready for the next group of stuff we gotta talk about, and you almost don't get back to the other stuff. So that's something too. I mean, again, that's not a charter thing, but it's a workflow thing. If you have too much to do, then it forces you to meet more often, and you sort of get on that treadmill that you just don't have time to really delve into a lot of that type of things. I probably see most boards meet, every 2 weeks. So they have time to digest and research and read and ask questions, and then, bring it back up.
So, in your experience, was having a stronger TA than what we do here, does that cut down on the politics within the select board? Does it cut down on the TA being subject to the politics of the inside of the board?
Well, so this is what I say about town business, we're apolitical, but we have to know how to maneuver in a political environment because the people we work for, right? It's the politicals outside of the TA, the department heads, other, activities, that's where sometimes you can, run into a little, sticky situation. That's why I say that organizational turbulence, right? When you're in the position I'm in, we expect that. We have to be able to maneuver in that space as well as, the day-to-day stuff that we deal on, or deal with. So I think if you look back and you see all the agendas, right? So go back a year, look at all the agendas, and then try to pick out things that you think are, that could be day-to-day. You look for where are the policy stuff being discussed, because if so much of the time is spent on more operational issues, then that's your key, that maybe there's a little bit too day-to-day, activity that the board has to deal with that prevents them maybe from, and again, I'm only giving you my view, I'm not speaking for any of my, the select board members, they, hopefully will come before the committee too to give you their view of things, but I think with, when you look at, if there's too much, the things that you expect your chief administrative officer to be able to handle, and took that away, well, there's white space there, they can talk about X, take a little bit more, whether it should be on the, in the town administrator's, role, and they're accountable for that, then that creates even more white space for them to talk about the bigger issues, and how do we tackle the sewering long range, and what's the next thing that we're gonna have to, deal with, it's called the big rock issues. You gotta have the time to identify those and actually talk about them, so, yeah, I think if you are under a strong TA, all that stuff happens under that umbrella, and the board is more focused on the bigger things that are, facing the community, in various areas.
All right, we ready to,
One
last
One comment.
quick one?
First, thanks for coming in. It was very
Yeah, I'm
entertaining
not
and
confused or more than anything,
illuminating.
but I,
No.
No,
Not at
no, it's
all.
been good.
But let me also say that you're in a very unique position, I see. You're not somebody who's dependent at all on what we come up with here. You're also in a position to guide us. We're in the process of bringing a consultant in here, which kind of you have
Has
the
been-
same criteria.
Has been hired.
Right, well, has been hired, I understand, but I mean, we're meeting him next month, or her, or whatever. Yeah, but we have somebody right here in the community.
Well,
that,
we can have him come back.
Yeah, that's my point.
You may not wanna come back after this.
What I wanna do, you've laid out this big road map of all kinds of issues that cover the gamut from policy to specifics. We're gonna have to digest this, kind of put it into some sort of narrative. And I'm hoping that whether it's done while you're still here or after they've replaced with a permanent,
Unless we can
your
keep you.
input to this process, I think, will be invaluable, and I hope you'll agree to do that.
well, it's interesting you bring that up, because my guess is, I would, again, if anybody's doing their homework, that they'll be watching, because right now, one of the things, when you look at the fact that we're in this leadership transition right now, and somebody's gonna say, hey, I just saw the Harwich job posted, and let me look into that. They'll look at what we currently have, and then they'll find out, oh, there's a planning commission going on. They'll be very interested to see how their job might change, because they could take the job and not know what their job might look like. So it'd be interesting, as you get further on in the process, because I don't know, is it
18
1
month,
year? Oh,
18 months.
It could be either 12 or 18 months,
Okay,
but
you just started, right, so you still
in
have.
July.
Yeah, okay, so that's fine, because they'll be able to get their feet wet in what's currently there and perhaps even contribute to some of the stuff that you're talking about now. Yeah,
So we want to be respectful of your time.
sure, yeah.
So if,
There's 36 hours in a day, right?
it all depends how you mark the day. Should we have an issue that we're discussing, that we do have, perhaps, would like your comment, if we were to put it on one page, maybe one paragraph, and send it to you for your review, not taxing you, but on rare occasion, would that be okay?
Yeah, I'm here to help. I mean, I have, like I say, even though I may not be here long term, I have a vested interest in the outcome, for our town, right?
Resident of the community,
Yeah, it's our
right.
town, my grandkids are here, right? How do we set ourselves up for, success for the next generations and,
Yep.
set the right conditions for them to prosper here, just like we have. I look at that as an obligation, so, we're all generally, the same age, right? But we have to take our lens and go, I need to figure out how to think like the current and future generations that we're building a community for, because we're the ones doing the work, and but they're the ones that will hopefully reap the benefits of what we're doing in a positive way, and that's always, as you see at town meeting, right? How many young people are at town, things like that, right? It's they have a different, not mindset per se, because they love the community, but, they have a lot more things to probably balance than we did, during our time and involvement in government in some ways. So how do we engage that portion of our population so that we're not going, yeah, we're gonna go this way, and everybody's going, what are they doing, right? That's not what we want. Well, we need to hear from them, so that's just a challenge that every community has. We're not alone, but.
Well, culture also changes over time. So I think it's a danger for a community to stay with 1940. When 80 years have passed, the demographics have changed. Culture does change.
Right.
Some things may not change, but some things do.
Well, we even do that internally, and I've talked to the board a little bit about this as we're working through different things, but think about when we were working, we were workaholics, right? It was job, family, whatever. Not like that today. It's family, work, that family piece is really important. So we deal with internally with our employees. As somebody that's, the sort of the boss of a lot of people, I need to always be cognizant about, what I think might be good, or what I, came up through the workforce with is not the same thing that motivates the workforce of today. And so as we try to recruit and retain employees, our senior leaders and managers need to make sure that they understand what drives current employees and things like that. And that's where having a, positive culture and a team environment and all the things that are important to people, that they feel like they have value and they're contributing in whatever portion of the town they're actually working in, and recognizing them for that and thanking them for that, because that's what different from us. We just came to work and ground away, right? That's what we did. But the younger generation isn't like that. So the challenge for the future administrators is making sure that they understand that and translate to the department heads who supervise people, that you can't just say, oh, gee, they don't, know what because they'll vote with their feet, which you've seen some of that, right?
I've been voting.
Okay.
Tony, thank you
Thank
so much
you
for
so
being
much
here.
for coming.
I don't know if it was helpful, but
Oh, it was extremely
I
helpful.
think it was very helpful.
if they change the locks tomorrow,
Well,
I
Seems to me when we get to the financial piece, we might be looking for some input at that point too.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
There's
Maybe
stuff-
the new finance director can come and join us.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
assume you're gonna be
They're gonna be
meeting
done
with
before
each of the
then.
select board members at some point.
We
and
have
they
asked
obviously have a
them,
piece of-
we have asked them to give us their thoughts.
Okay,
I don't know if they're going to come individually, but in all town agent, the town agencies got asked in a letter, an email,
okay.
for their input into the charter by committee, or if they wanted to do it individually, and so I don't know if we'll hear from the select board or not, who knows,
Yeah,
Okay.
Well, I
I'm
think
sure
they
they'll
should
have
be
to-
invited in at some point as
it's a
the,
possibility.
Yeah, I think it's important to hear from
Yes.
them, yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so, are we ready to go home?
Motion to
Ready to go.
adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we.
Motion to adjourn,
Second.
Lou, second, Herb, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks.
That was a good meeting.
Did you bring
Good
those
seeing you again.
papers to sign?
Very good meeting.
Great meeting, I'd say.
It was
Where's
a
the
great
little
meeting.
It's
button?
like a little bit of masonry unpacked in there.
The one that says-
that's it.
Team stuff and
It says
Not
there,
the
there's
one that says-
instructions right there. Read the instructions.
Hot mic moments, right?
Oh, God, yeah, we had
Good to
that.
see you.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for coming, Tony.
Oh, you're welcome, absolutely. Hey,
I'm ordering those books. I'm gonna give them to you. You
Well,
can
you need to get the one that called It's Your Ship, too, that's, you know.
That's true.
yeah.
toughen them to read one, never
Paul,
mind
you have
two.
those papers?
All right, guys, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony.
Let's go.
Take
care.
All right, take care.
It seems to be working.
What's that?
Keep doing what
Oh,
you're doing.
thanks.
Did you turn it off?
I can't turn it off. You know what I mean?
Okay, here
Here's
we
the,
go.
here's the void check.
Here's the check.
Oh, yes, here's my check. Yes, thank
Very
you.
old brick for a doorstop. See you guys.
Take care. Thanks, Tony.
And is this the tax ID number here
No.
by any chance? We need to have that. It wasn't necessary on the first one, but on the second one I did. So
It should be in
anyway,
all the other paperwork that you have,
yeah, I could probably dig it up somewhere, but,
because I don't have it on me.
okay. Well,
So, Paul, the tax ID,
yeah, organizational tax ID number.
REHHS.
And when you got that, I can send this in, and I need
so
your
we have this-
signature on that.
There
This
you
is
go.
for the check writing form.
So I sign here?
Yeah. And when we get the tax ID number, I'll put that on there, and we'll
print
send that in, and this is to have them issue
Turn off the computer.
checks. And I've just said here, all we want is the checks, so we're gonna use them less than 5 times a month, right? They
Probably.
want
Oh,
the
God,
frequency mentioned,
What's today, the 11th? Yeah,
yes.
no,
What are you
12th.
talking about?
Today's the 11th?
Oh, yeah, 11th, yeah.